Exam 2, quizzes part 3, deadline of this not today, but next week, at end of day. Then exam 3, 4, quizzes part 4, deadline December 7th, end of day. Exam 5, end of the normal final time. And then for the paper, draft deadline, done. If you turn in the paper, I brought it back here. If you got it to me earlier on, then I was able to write full-time comments. If you got it in later, then I had to like whip through it in just a few minutes, and so there's a comment sheet on the back. But in any case, paper drafts, there's a comment sheet stapled to the back, and you look at the markings in the paper, and then flip to the back page, and it will say what the markings mean. For the paper deadline itself, for the grade, the 14th, deadline for the +5 bonus, then the 21st, emergency deadline for full credit, and then the desperation deadline on December 8th for the half credit. Before pressing on to our new stuff, anything about the stuff that has been, or the stuff that shall be, that needs more stuff. Okay, so last time we're looking at our good dead friend David Hume, who was talking about personal identity, and as we saw, he's sort of pushing the empiricist line, the project, as far as he thinks it can go. And he rejects the view of people like Locke and Descartes that there's a simple continuing self that is identity across time. And he begins by saying, it's just a bundle of perceptions, and then we connect them together through memory, we see a resemblance, and then we infer a cause and effect, and we imagine a string connecting the beads of each moment. And then Andy kind of breaks down and just says, it's all just verbal, you can never decide, it's just a question of using the word I appropriately, and then he goes and has a beer. And pretty much how it always ends in beer, which I guess is not a terrible ending. Before pressing on to our good dead friend Buddha, anything about our good dead friend Hume, or any other dead guys that need more stuff? We now turn to the view of Buddha. Buddha, of course, non-Western. Buddha is famous for achieving enlightenment on the Bodhi tree, realizing the noble truth. The biggest noble truth of all, of course, is life is pain. And then you die, then you're trapped in a world of illusions by your desires, and you're reborn again for more pain, and then you die, and then reborn again, and repeat forever. But there is a way off the wheel of life, which is to cease all your desires, even the desire to cease desires, and achieve a state of nirvana. Not the grunge band from the 90s, but the original. And it literally means a state of no wind. It is a cessation of all desires, and then you'll cease to be. But of course, according to Buddhism, you never were, so there really are no desires, there is no world, there is no suffering. But anyways, so sort of confusing. So what is the classical Buddhist view of personal identity? What is the person? And the short answer is nothing, because everything is nothing. If you ever saw the movie The Matrix, there's a line in it in which Neo is talking to the young person who seems to be bending the spoon with his mind in the Matrix, and he says to Neo, of course, the classic line, there is no spoon. And for the Buddhist, that applies to everything. I'm not real, you're not real, nothing's real. Anyways, on to the unreal. Now in this discussion, we have two people. We have Nagasena, speaking for the Buddha, and we have the king, unnamed. Perhaps Elvis Presley, who knows. So Nagasena is talking to the king and says to the king that he is Nagasena. But this is a mere name, a mere label, mere wind. Why? Because he says to the king, there is no self. Now the king, being a pretty smart fellow, asks some obvious questions. Namely, if there is no self, who's doing all of this stuff? So who provides the priests with their robes and their begging bowls and so forth? Who uses these robes and bowls? Who keeps the precepts? Who meditates? Who commits bad deeds? Who tell lies? And who does all this stuff? And the obvious answer is, if there's nobody, then who's doing it? only possible answer is nobody. Now the king, of course, realizes the implications of this. If there is no self, there can be no merit, no demerit, no good or bad, no evil. Why not? Well, there's no one to do anything good or bad, and there's no one to be harmed or benefited, because there is no one. So there are no murderers, there are no murdered, there are no teachers, there are no learners, there is nothing. Now, they then turn to our good friend, the argument by elimination. And as we saw, they're kind of like two modes or flavors of this argument. One is kind of the classic Sherlock Holmes method, which is pretty good for reasoning out, who done it. Like if you're reading a mystery novel or watching a mystery movie or working actually in crime solving. So, for example, if you're doing an argument by elimination, if you have 5 suspects on the train and you know one of them is the murderer for sure, you just don't know which one. If you eliminate 4 of them, who's ever left has got to be the murderer. Because if among them is the murderer and there's only 5 options, one of them's got to be that. And that's sort of the argument by elimination. There's also the argument by destruction, in which you say there's only, say, 3 options. You show none of them work, so nothing can work. And we saw that earlier in the semester as well. Now what Nagasena is doing is arguing to destruction. And what he does is go through sort of the usual suspects for personal identity. The first thing is he goes to like hair, nail, saliva, etc., which is kind of a needlessly detailed way of saying that Nagasena is not the body, which of course Locke would agree with. Second, he goes to sensations, feelings, etc., and this would be sort of like what Locke, his view was. The self is the consciousness, and even human, perceptions. But he rejects all of that. Then he considers maybe it's something else, something that's not any of this other stuff. And so the answer, basically his point is, it's either this stuff or everything else. But it's none of this stuff, so it is nothing. And so the king concludes that Nagasena is simply an empty sound, simply a wind that blows nowhere, that is no wind at all. There is nothing. But they're talking a whole lot about nothing. Now this creates a bit of a problem because, as I mentioned, in classic Buddhism, everyone is trapped in the world of illusion, chained to the wheel by their desires, and reborn, and suffer, and die, reborn again, and suffer. And so the question is, if there's no self, how do you have reincarnation? Fortunately, Nagasena has got an answer. And being a philosopher, of course, he answers the question in the form of an analogy, which was, I think, the original proposal for Jeopardy, but people said that was too stupid. So they did not do that. Damn you, Alex Trebek. Someday I'll have my show. I think he's retiring, so maybe I'll take Jeopardy. And all answers are given in the form of analogies. Yeah, that wouldn't go terribly well. So how does this rebirth take place without transmigration? Because there's nothing to transmigrate, so how does it happen? Now, of course, one might say, how can there even be how can there be any rebirth if there's nothing? But here's how Nagasena tries to address it. Again, with 2 analogies. And like with any analogy, there are of course 3 standards for assessing them. How much do they have in common? How relevant are the things in common? And are there any relevant dissimilarities that break them? In short, are they enough alike to make for a good comparison? So the first analogy used is lighting a light from another light. So get a candle, get an unlit candle, touch the candle lights up. And he claims that there is the lighting of the light from another light, but nothing transmigrates. And this is, by analogy, how rebirth would work without any transmigration. Does that analogy work? Kinda, except for one problem. In like physics, if you're lighting a light from another light, are you actually transferring something? Yeah, because you have to transfer the energy. So something is going from one light to the other. So you bring in science, it ruins it, as science ruins everything. Kind of its job. Kill the unicorns. Thank you, science. Second illustration, poetry. Gives the illustration of when one learns poetry from a teacher, like a poem about a tree or a goldfish or something, or a goldfish in a tree, sad goldfish, ends a tragedy. The poem of the goldfish who wanted to climb trees, it ends really sad, not a kid's story. Or a good lesson, kids don't try stuff, you just die. That's terrible. So you have someone learning this poetry, and Augustina says there's no transmigration. Just like the verse is somehow transmitted without something being transmitted. Now, on one hand you could say perhaps this works, because like when you learn a poem, it's not like something comes out of someone else's brain and gets in yours, and it's not like, pouring drinks out of a bottle where you lose what's in the bottle. It's no loss. But then again, on the other hand, you could say there is a transmission, because there has to be information, there's nothing lost, but information is transmitted. So maybe that doesn't work. But then, of course, Nagasena dies, but he never was, so not sad at all. So that's a classic Buddhist view. There is no self. And so it went from, John Locke's view, the self is the consciousness in the soul, typically found in the body, to Hume's, the bundle of perception, to Buddha, there is no self. And so in philosophical thought, huge range of views of the self. And this is just three, or many others. But if we're moving away from Buddhism, anything about Buddha or no self that needs more stuff. So now we turn to, sadly a bit late for Halloween, but ghosts and minds. This is a philosophical look at the problem of ghosts, and a result of a bet. I was bet that I could not get an article published in philosophy about ghosts. As you can see, I won the bet. Not only once, but 3 times. I only collected once though, because the bet was not that I could get published 3 times, so that I could get published. Now interestingly, even though all human cultures have tales of ghosts, some benevolent ghosts that are helpful, others that are malign, there's been pretty much no philosophical treatment of ghosts, which is kind of surprising, considering how prevalent they are. One reason might be, of course, that ghosts are seen as sort of superstitious, culture-y, and hence not worthy of philosophical consideration. Prior to this, about the only sort of serious mention of ghosts in philosophy was in Plato's Phaedo, in which he kind of briefly mentions them, but then doesn't really do anything with it. And it seems like quite a shame to not have a philosophical, coverage of something as interesting as the ghosts. Now, the purpose of this short essay is to look at ghosts within the context of academic philosophy, which of course then makes the ghost not fun at all. Because again, science ruins everything, academics ruins everything else. So the objective is to look at ghosts within the context of philosophy of mind. On the one hand, this makes ghosts more boring, but on the other hand, it makes philosophy of mind more interesting. So kind of a trade-off. It's like putting cheese on broccoli. Broccoli makes the cheese taste less good, but the cheese makes the broccoli taste so much better. Once I found you could put cheese all over broccoli, then broccoli became a thing that I would eat because of the cheese. Also, you can fry it too. Broccoli. Yeah, you put it dip it in batter, put some cheese in there, and then fry it. It's good. Surprisingly good. Because cheese and frying makes almost all things better. Probably not ghosts though. Probably not ghosts. Now, in order to talk about ghosts philosophically, we of course have to have a definition of ghosts to know what we're talking about. In popular culture, of course, people have a rough idea of ghosts. They're like dead people still doing stuff, maybe. But that's all pretty vague. So we need to have a clear and neutral definition of ghost so we know what we're talking about, what we're trying to discuss, and so we don't beg any questions. We don't assume any position is correct or incorrect right at the start. Now, of course, since we do have to have a definition, that means they're going to put some limits on it. So some things will be perhaps unfairly eliminated at the start. So this is what a ghost, at least on this view, has to be. And we're going with kind of the intuitive view that has held throughout history. First thing, of course, is ghosts were once people. Although I guess you could have like ghost dogs and stuff too. So it could just go, there once a mind. And of course, to be a ghost, one of the unfortunate job requirements, or in order to get the job, you have to be dead. And so the definition of a ghost would be, it's got to be a mind that was once living that is now dead and disembodied by that death. Now, according to religions that have heaven, heaven is full of, dead people. But we don't want to say that heaven is haunted, because that would be kind of weird. And so we don't think that heaven is full of ghosts. We think it's full of spirits and souls and stuff. So a ghost is something that is still kind of here. And so sort of the third condition is it's got to be able to interact causally with physical stuff here. And it could be in just a very small degree. So in the classic ghost stories and in paranormal investigations, ghosts often do pretty minor stuff. I don't know if you've seen the movies or the shows, they can like rattle things, lower temperature a bit, slam doors, etc. And then of course you can have more extreme ghosts like the movies that can do, like throw knives at people or animate dolls or do other things. Like the paranormal series. So we got the rough idea of ghosts. It's a mind, its original body is dead, and it still can interact with the physical world to some degree. Now, in the usual fiction and speculation, ghosts are typically presented as incorporeal, that they're non-physical, ghosty stuff. But even though it's a common property, we don't want to assume they have to be incorporeal, non-material, because we want to leave it open that there could be ghosts that are physical, sort of ghosts, still ghosts, but physical entities, and that they would be like some of the Greek concepts of ghosts, where they wouldn't be incorporeal entities, they'd be still physical things, but of a special sort. So we got the conditions for ghosts there. Now the next step is, of course, to take the various philosophies of mind, not all of them, of course, some of the popular ones, and apply them to the ghosting. One once very popular theory of mind, and the idea of a theory of mind is this. You create a theory of mind to answer the question, what is the mind? So they say things like, Sally believes that pizza is tasty, or Fred has got a persistent pain, or Anne likes watermelons, and Sam likes more pizza. Pizza's always good. What does that mean? What does it have those beliefs, feelings, and desires to like things and dislike things? Well, that would be philosophy of mind. It tries to answer the question, what is the mind? So what are our beliefs, thoughts, and desires? Now, identity theory takes it as the literal identity. And here's how that works. If you're an identity theorist, you believe that the mind is material. So it's non-ghosty. It's going back to the notions of materialism and physicalism. It's everything that exists is a body. So, badly drawn, the mind would be the brain and the central nervous system. Yes, like maybe that stuff. So what would it be to have a mental state, like liking pizza or feeling a slight itch on your elbow? What would that be? Well, for the identity theorist, and hence the name, they would say every mental state, like liking the taste of popcorn or disliking the smell of burning plastic, which probably everyone does. They would be a particular state of the brain. To use a really bad example, liking popcorn might be neuron 1, 2, and 3 firing that order. That's totally made up. So the idea would be that's what it would be. So liking popcorn would be this, and this would be liking popcorn. Roughly put, the hardware is the mental state. Now a good or maybe terrible illustration of this would be like a mechanical typewriter in a way. Because like when you're typing stuff on it, it's just the mechanics of it that's what makes the letter. Or like a mechanical thermometer. It being set at 23 degrees or 68 degrees is just a physical state. So that's the mind, and the mental states are particular activities of the brain. Now that does have some appeal, because we all know we got a brain, scientists and stuff and doctors know damage to the brain does kind of particular things, and this view was pretty popular until people started to kind of think about it in some detail. Now, in terms of why it was eventually rejected, a variety of reasons, but one of the main ones was this. Scientists found out pretty early on, in a way, that you could have damage to the brain that would be compensated for. So to give an extreme example, there's a condition, pretty rare, but some people have it, and they found that if they find like a kid that has it, they catch them early enough, they can literally, not figuratively, literally remove half the person's brain, just like cut off like a whole, so like here's their skull, and they like take out half the brain, and then it is bad. And you think, when I read about that, I think, they're done.
Yeah, that could take away their motor skills. That could take away a lot.
Yeah, you think losing half the brain, because like one of the classic insults is to tell someone they have half the brain, and this would seem to be like, that's it. They won't be able to do anything. The weird thing is, which I didn't expect at all, is they'll be perfectly normal, or maybe like 99% perfectly normal. There'll still be some, like if they have to the right part of their brain removed, they'll have some trouble like with the control on the left side of their body, but they'll have full intelligence, full language skills, everything, which seems pretty bizarre, but is true. And so if liking popcorn is those three things firing the left side of a person's brain, and that person doesn't have that part of their brain, then it would follow they could never like popcorn. But they can. So the argument goes is that it's not any particular state of the brain that makes up like, neuron 1, 2, and 3 that makes liking popcorn. It's got to be something else. And the metaphor, we'll see this when we talk about functionalism, what became popular when computers became a thing is making the brain like a computer. So unlike a mechanical thing where the parts are the thing, with a computer, it's not the parts that matter, it's the software that's running. And so identity theory gave way to, the last one we look at, functions. So how does identity theory, getting back to ghosts, how does this impact ghosting? Well, if identity theory were true, and the person is the brain, when the brain's gone, where's the person? They're gone too. It's just like, when your thermometer, if you have an old thermometer, one of the ones with a little mercury in it, I haven't seen one of those in a while. I used to have one in my house. mess, and I took it off. I got a new, fancy electric one before I had a little mercury switch. Super dangerous. There were brakes. They're like, oh, don't go dispose of that. Just throwing it out in your yard. Like the old mechanical ones, that's, if it gets burnt up, it's gone. And so if the person is identical to their brain goes bingo.
So a person like in a vegetable state, you say like they're going like they're not a person.
Yeah, on this view, yeah, if they don't have those states, and there's, some nervous system's not doing that, their person's gone.
Yeah, physically they're there, but not
Yeah, well,
consciously.
yeah, not mentally. Yep, so identity theory were true, no ghosts. So no ghosty hauntings. But of course, ghosts are cool. So how can we have ghosts? Well, not surprisingly, the most plausible way to have ghosts is going with the classic substance dualism, also known sometimes as Cartesian dualism. And we saw this before. On Cartesian dualism, you have a body, but you are your soul. The soul is a non-extended, non-physical thinking thing. And this is kind of the common sense view that people have before they get corrupted by science and philosophy, that they have a spirit or soul. Now in this view, this is the mind. So if you like popcorn and hate the smell of burning hair, who doesn't? Terrible smell. Then that would be not for the dualist, that would be some sort of thingy going on in that ghosty ectoplasm, however it would. So the mental states are states of an incorporeal substance. Now, with dualism, this is pretty much the sort of classic ghost of the classic ghost stories and ghost movies. Because of dualism, you are your soul, spirit, mind, and your body is just something you're connected to. And so when the body dies, in theory at least, the soul could keep on going. So that allows for the potential for survival post-death. Because, to use an analogy, the body is kind of like the car, except of course you feel your body, you feel your car. If your car gets wrecked, you can hopefully hop up and keep on going. So how could the ghost ghost? Well, it meets the first condition. The mind can survive death of the body because it's separate. What about the causal interaction? Well, in classic dualism, the idea, of course, is that somehow the mind is connected to the body, linked to it. And it doesn't just drive it like a person drives a car, because we also feel. So we feel like sensations of hunger, thirst, pain, itchiness, etc. And so there's a two-way causal connection. We have a special connection there. Now, philosophers call the challenge of figuring out how that works the mind-body problem. Because the question is, how does the ghost, how does it connect to the body? How does it steer it around? And Descartes spent his life trying to figure this out. Never solved it. As far as I know, no one solved it. But if we do believe that the soul controls the body, then you could have a classic ghost, because if the soul can drive around a physical body, then it makes sense that even if it loses its body, it would still have some sort of connection system, some sort of transmission and reception system where it could interact with the physical world. Now, it may be less effective, but maybe you could still do it. To use an analogy, think of like a remote control for a TV. It's a bad analogy in a way, but if you think of the soul as kind of being like, you're the person, the TV is the body, and you're working the remote to control it. Now, if you lose the original TV, you may be able to reprogram the remote to control something else, like another TV. And so using that metaphor, if the soul can work the remote to control the body, maybe it can, you know, kind of rig up its controller to control other stuff too. It may not be that good at it, because it's, you know, it's trying to control something that it doesn't normally control, which could help explain why in the classic ghost stories, ghosts are generally not super good at controlling stuff. They're usually just like rattling doors, you know, knocking over plates, that type of stuff. And so that would be totally consistent with ghosts. They would be the soul hanging out here doing stuff. So if you're a substance dualist, you can have ghosts. And in fact, they're the classic, typically the classic ghost. Now, another form of dualism was brought about by people who didn't like substance. The idea that there's like substances. And they said, hey, let's not accept substances. Let's go instead with properties and not have like that weird substance stuff. And one of the main arguments against having substance, we saw in John Locke, it's weird. You know, like, we understand that things have qualities, but if I were to peel away all the qualities from this backpack, you know, the color, the shape, the size, density, mass, and volume, and took them all away, I would seem to be left with nothing. Whereas Descartes would say there would still be a material substance there, it just somehow would have no qualities. And as Locke said, you know, something I know not what. So if you take the view that substances are just too weird, you might decide to embrace something slightly less weird, namely properties, qualities. Now, property dualism is the view that you don't have two separate substances, you just have two types of properties or qualities. So, you know, roughly put, if you believe in substance, you'd believe that there'd be a material substance, whatever that is. You know, I use my Mr. Potato Head metaphor, and somehow stuck into it are all these properties and qualities, although it itself doesn't have any properties or qualities. The property dualist says, that's really weird. Let's just get rid of that stuff and just have qualities. So the property dualist would say, yeah, you get all these physical and mental properties, there's just no weird, mysterious substance, you know, underneath them, whatever that would be. So on this view, there are physical properties, you know, the usual suspects, mass, density, volume, deliciousness, etc. And then, I assume deliciousness is a property. Some foods have it, some do not. And then you'd have the mental properties, which would be things like, you know, all the, you know, belief, sadness, happiness, and so on, all feelings, emotions, etc. Now, there are two classic flavors of property dualism. The first one, which is quite a mouthful, is epiphenomenalism. No connection to EpiPens. But that's epiphenephrine, which is something different, which is like related to the adrenal glands. Somebody used to poke people when they get stung by bees and are allergic. And they recently jacked the prices up on those ridiculously. Then brought them back down again because they thought, well, maybe having people die because they can't afford them is bad. I first wondered about that when I watched the movie Pulp Fiction. That seems horrible. But I guess if you're dying, that's better than death. So, better than death. I think that's the motto for some restaurants too. Maybe. So what's epiphenomenalism and why? Well, epiphenomenalism arose because of the mind-body problem. Because the challenge was, how does the mind, mental stuff, if it's separate, interact with the physical stuff? How does that work? And epiphenomenalists thought, hey, we can make the problem half as bad by, instead of having a two-way causal interaction, just going one way. So the epiphenomenalists, and the reason why it has a name epiphenomenalist is because they believe in epiphenomenon, which is basically a fancy term for a phenomena that's like above something else that is caused by something, but it itself does not cause things. And to use kind of a bad metaphor, it's like a light show. So, I mean, this is not a perfect analogy, but the projector is projecting this, and you can kind of think of this as an epiphenomenon, because it is caused by the projector, but it itself doesn't cause other things. Although, yeah, it does, because you can see it, etc., but it would be sort of an off, the result of it. So what the epiphenomenalist said is, you have all these physical properties. So here are the physical properties that make up the physical brain. And so they call it, it's like the mass, density, volume, electrical states, etc., all those properties of the brain. And the claim is that all these properties, they cause the mental properties. So if you had like these physical properties in the brain, they would in turn cause a mental property, like liking the taste of popcorn, or disliking the smell of burning hair, or an itchy feeling in your left elbow, or whatever it is you're happening to be feeling, thinking, or experiencing. And so they're not identical. So the mental is not the physical, but it's a one-way cause. This causes this. Now, on this view, the mental stuff is causally inert. To use a metaphor, it's like a light show. It doesn't do stuff. It's just kind of, projected by the physical properties. And again, the reason was, hey, we can solve the mind-body problem by making it half as bad, having it go one way. So, for example, on this view, if I step on like a tack or a nail, I would have the nerves do their thingy, and then I would have these physical properties here, which would be the report, the firing the brain of getting that signal, and then it would produce this feeling of pain. Now, kind of our common sense view is the pain would then cause us to do what? Yeah, I go, ow, I'm having the feels, and then pull your foot off the nail. Now, on the epiphenomenalist view, the pain doesn't do anything. Now, they don't deny, they wouldn't say, oh, you don't move your foot, but what they would say is, this triggering would create feeling of pain. Then you would have another set of properties triggered by these physical properties, which would cause you to move. And then you'd have the awareness, I am moving, I am saying out. So roughly put, kind of crudely put, the mind is like, it's like someone sitting in a room getting reports, but they don't actually do anything. They're just sitting there, and someone says to them, this happened. And then someone else says, this happened. And then someone else says, that happened. And they have, they have the feels and so forth, but they don't have any controls. They don't actually do anything. So the mind in this case is just passive. It doesn't actually do stuff. Now again, we kind of feel like we do stuff, but all the stuff that's going on is in the physical properties. The mental properties, in a way, to use an analogy, it's like the check engine light, in a way. You have this stuff going on in the engine, you get the light going on, but the light doesn't actually itself do anything. It's just a report. So they don't deny that you feel pain and think and stuff. The idea, though, that all the stuff that's going on in your mind doesn't affect the physical properties. It's all one way. Now, the problem with this is, first, it doesn't really solve the mind-body problem. I mean, you could say, yeah, it makes it half as bad, but there's still the question of how does that work? And then the other thing is, in a way, it's kind of worse. Because the idea of if you're going to have have mental properties and physical properties, it just seems weird to have them just be one way. And when you say to someone, yeah, when you're feeling pain, your mind doesn't actually do anything, it's just, getting reports, that seems kind of weird, because we normally think of it going two ways. So, on this view, getting back to the ghosting, could there be ghosts? Well, on one hand, when I originally wrote this, my original conclusion was, well, no. To use an analogy, so we can use the analogy of a sparkler. You can think of the physical properties as like the sparkler, and the sparks coming off it, to use the analogy, are the epiphenomena. Now, of course, the sparks can actually do stuff like set stuff on fire. But, metaphorically. But what happens to the sparks when the sparkler burns up? Yeah, they're gone. Everybody's sad. Sparklers are the saddest of fireworks, and a burnt out sparkler is the saddest of all things. Yeah, so it would seem if the original, body's gone, the sparks go away. But last year, someone brought up the show Supernatural on the CW, of course, where all the shows live. And one of the things they do, if you've ever seen the show, some episodes are good, some terrible. I like my show, but they have a lot of episodes. So they have a lot of episodes. It's been on so long, you can actually see the characters getting like quite a bit older.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually there'll be like two old guys like, hand me my cane, Sam. And one of the things in their sort of metaphysics of the show is that ghosts require a physical object or body. Because what they always do, kind of their standard thing for, got a ghost. What do we do, Sam? You gotta go and dig it up and burn it, of course. So they're always out in graveyards, barely getting caught, somehow digging up 6 feet of soil with a shovel, and then getting the body and lighting it up. And so if you go with like the supernatural view of it, then the physical stuff could be like dead, but then the mental properties could keep on going. Now in a way this is still epiphenomenalism, because the body is still needed. It just somehow still functions when the body is dead. And then somehow destroying the body, like just burning it up, and it makes it so the mind can't keep going. Yeah, so if I was rewriting this in light of the findings of Professor Dean, Professor Sam, on Supernatural, that would include that. Yeah, then ghosts could be a possibility. They would need a physical medium upon which to be based, but they could still be existing. At least on the evidence provided by a fictional TV show. Now the second flavor of property dualism is the same, except it's two-way. So you have the mental properties and physical properties interact, and this is more of our normal view, that when you step on a nail, that we have all the physiological responses that you learn about, like in anatomy and physiology, or your classes in biology, and then you have the feeling of pain. But then kind of our common sense view is that then the feeling of pain leads to, that's my pixelology plaguing me again, all those pixels keep drifting off the screen. Probably get workman's comp for that, it's pixel alone. So you got the physical properties here causing mental and vice versa. And again, that's more of our common sense view, that what we think and feel affects our body, our mental, our physical properties, and our physical properties affect our mental properties. I mean, a good example would be something like depression, where a person's physical states can cause them to feel depressed, but of course also their mental states can affect their physical states, which then in turn make them feel worse. And then of course you can get medicines that affect the physical states that then affect the mental states. This is more of our kind of our common sense view of how people work. Now in this view, the survival after death would be possible, because the mental states don't depend causally on the physical stuff. So even if the body was completely destroyed, all the physical properties were gone, the mental properties could keep on going. And it wouldn't be a substance, you wouldn't have, like, again, that mysterious metaphysical substance with properties like somehow stuck into it, you would just have a bundle of properties. Now, since the mental properties are supposed to interact with physical properties, again, it's just like with property dualism, the mental properties could keep on, interacting with the physical world, doing stuff. Now, they might still need something to, connect to, which is one thing that's, if you follow ghost stuff at all, traditionally ghosts don't travel anymore, although there are traveling ghosts, usually haunting like, phantom traveling, usually haunting like airplanes and ships and stuff. But usually they're like in one place, like one house, or like a battlefield or someplace. And actually the least haunted place would be a graveyard, because no one ever dies in graveyards. Really. That's where they put people long after they're dead. So maybe the safest place to, except for zombie times. Then that. Yeah, so you could have the property dualism, have ghosty ghosts, ghosting. Now, as I mentioned with identity theory, the rise of computers in some ways spelled the doom of identity theory. Because what became kind of the new model was, instead of just having, okay, it's the brain and its states, people saw like computers and like, wow, this is cool, the mind's gonna be like a computer. So functionalism, it's one of the most popular ones, the use of the mind today. Many philosophers embrace functionalism, because, computers. Here's the idea. With the identity theorist, it's, contrast with identity theory, it works like this. Identity theory, again, to be in pain or, disliking the smell of burning hair, would be those exact, it has to be that, like neuron 1, 2, 3, fire. If you don't get that, then you don't like popcorn. But as we saw, there are cases where people could have, half their brain removed and still like popcorn. So liking popcorn is not a matter of neurons 1, 2, 3 firing, it's something else. Now what the functionalists say is that mental states are not defined in terms of hardware, in terms of being particular firings of neurons, is defined in terms of software, namely functions. That you have an input and then you get an output. And anything that gives the same outputs from the same input would be functionally the same. So one person, like liking popcorn, would mean that if someone said popcorn, you would say, yes, please. And it wouldn't matter whether it was neurons 1, 2, and 3, or neurons 7, 5, and 52, or whatever. As long as the same input gave the same output, the function would say, those are the same mental states. It's inputs and outputs that matter. Now, a good model of this comes from when they were trying to do the clones of IBM computers. Way back in the early days of personal computing, IBM made computers. They still do. And they made the fatal mistake of saying software doesn't matter, so they got this young guy, Bill Gates, to do their desktop operating system, and now Bill Gates is worth more than IBM. And so you had these computers running DOS and things like Word, etc. Then other companies like Compaq and Kaypro said, we want some of that sweet computer money. But of course, IBM owns all the trademarks and patents on their hardware. And so what companies did was this. They had engineers go and figure out all the inputs and outputs of the IBM computer. Now they can't duplicate the hardware because patent violation. So they can't just go and copy IBM's hardware legally. But what they could do is recreate all the inputs and outputs. So say like Kaypro or Compaq, they would build a put on the chips and stuff, and get it so even though the hardware is different, it can all do the same things as the original IBM, like run DOS and Word, etc. And that's why there were just tons of IBM clones, still are today. Whereas on the Mac side, only Apple computers can run Mac software, and they didn't let anybody else copy. They were protecting the software, also the hardware too. So only Macs can run Mac, Apple operating system. And so you could have two computers very different hardware, but still running the same programs. And so, what the difference is not in the hardware, but in the difference is not, the hardware is different, but they're running the same software. So this computer can run Word, this can run Word, and the functionalists apply that to the mind. You could have two different physical systems, but they could both be feeling pain or being happy. Now, having the same functional states means, of course, the same thing. So long story short, for the functionalist, an entity could lose its original body, but as long as its functional states were preserved, say by being copied into a computer or a new body, that person could keep on going. So in a way, you end up with a weird kind of possible ghost. A ghost in the shell, which is, of course, a famous anime, where you have not a traditional ghost, drifting around haunting people, but a person's mind copied into a computer after their death. And for the functionalist, that could be still the same person, so you could be haunting, the mainframe. Okay, so have a good long weekend, and when we meet again, more stuff.